Hi, I'm Kieran Jackson, Formula One correspondent at The Independent. We open the floor for your questions ahead of the upcoming F1 season. Let's see what you ask. First up, what's the strategy behind Red Bull purposely having a much slower second driver? Would they not almost guarantee the World Constructors' Championship if they replaced Sergio Perez with one of the faster drivers? I'd say that's a bit harsh on Sergio Perez. I think you have to remember where Red Bull were at the end of 2020. They had Alex Albon as their second driver, who was vastly slower than Max Verstappen. They switched it up, brought in Sergio Perez, and over the past 2 years, he's proven to be a more than capable teammate for Verstappen. He's won races in his own right in Monaco and Singapore last year, but he's also really helped Verstappen as a team player. You can forget his defence against Lewis Hamilton in Abu Dhabi in 2021. And although there was a little bit of friction towards the end of last season, I think Red Bull are really happy with having a solid pairing. They know Verstappen's the number one man, but Perez is quick enough in his own right to help them win the Constructors' Championship. But Red Bull have showed in the past that they're not afraid to make the big decisions, and if Perez's level drops at any point really in the season, then most of the grid would want that second spot at Red Bull, so Perez has to keep performing. Next up, Ben is hoping for an exciting season. How good is Ferrari's new strategy chief? Will Ferrari be able to keep up with Red Bull this year? So Fred Vasseur is the new Ferrari team principal. He replaced Mattia Binotto in the off-season, and I think he's what you describe as a safe pair of hands. He comes into Ferrari really needing to put his finger on what was the issues last season, so that was more or less twofold as they came back into championship contention. The first problem was their reliability, so that's something that he will work with the engineers over the off-season, but more importantly almost was the strategy errors they made. So Vasseur has come in, he's already changed the personnel in the strategic department. So Ferrari have again a very solid car. Their test was also very solid, but I think with Vasseur there, that will just bring a little bit of a more measured approach. There'll be less franticness on the grid in the Ferrari garage, and I think that will make for a much more clear strategy from Ferrari's point of view. He's already said he's not appointing a number one driver, for example, so that'll be music to Carlos Sainz's ears. But I think Ferrari will be right up there with Red Bull. Levi thinks Mercedes was sandbagging during testing, and when we hit the first race they're going to blow the field away. But is he being optimistic? So just for those who don't know, sandbagging is the process whereby teams in testing kind of hide the true potential of their car because they don't want teams to get a sniff that they might be quicker than they actually are. I don't think there was an awful lot of sandbagging at testing this year. I think Mercedes' issues were genuine issues. Day 2 in particular was a bit of a disaster for Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton was complaining about the balance of the car in the morning. George Russell had a hydraulics failure in the afternoon. There was a slight improvement on the final day, but I think there's a general concern amongst Mercedes about the quality of their car this year. They've obviously stuck with their pretty unique zero-pod philosophy, but there was a general tone of pessimism about whether they can win this weekend in Bahrain, which, coming from the likes of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, is never really what you want to hear. Sticking with Mercedes, the next question asks if Lewis Hamilton can get back to winning races and have a chance of the championship, or are Red Bull too far ahead? Also, do Mercedes like the car now, or do you think we might see the Plan B car at some point this year? I think if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan right now, you would be a tad concerned, not only for the short term of this weekend in Bahrain. I think a win looks pretty unlikely, but also his contract runs out at the end of this season and he's yet to sign. And I think he'd be wanting to wait to see if he's got a competitive car for this year and the next year before signing a new deal, which at the moment, Mercedes look the third, maybe even the fourth best team on the grid behind Aston Martin after the test. So it's definitely some concern at Mercedes. Mercedes are due a big upgrade at Imola, which is race 6. So they've been saying we'll see from that point onwards whether they can challenge for wins. And the word being branded about at Mercedes is eventually they'll have a car to compete and challenge for race wins. Stavrino asked for our prediction about Aston Martin's performance at the start of the season. Yeah, so Aston Martin were definitely the success story of testing. They've got a rapid car. They've got a very quick driver and 2-time world champion Fernando Alonso there as well this season. And even though Lance Stroll, their second driver, was out injured at the test, with the F2 champion Felipe Drugovich taking his place, and he may take Stroll's place in Bahrain this weekend too. Drugovich looked pretty capable too, and I think he might be thinking he could get points on what could be an F1 debut. But I think Alonso is no fool. When he switched from Alpine last summer, he knew what was coming. Aston Martin have invested heavily in their F1 programme. They've got a new base at Silverstone. They've got a new technical director in Dave Fellows, who's been signed from Red Bull, and this is his car. So there's a real expectation at Aston that they could be regularly in the points, and who knows, maybe even higher for podiums. And I think Alonso will be thinking in the back of his head, if it all falls into place, maybe a wet race, that he could get another win as well. And finally, which rookie will do better this year? So there's 3 rookies this year in Formula One. We first have Oscar Piastri, who is with McLaren. It was much talked about last summer when he kind of rejected Alpine's offer of a seat because he was their test driver and moved to McLaren to replace Daniel Ricciardo. There's a lot of expectation about how good this guy is. He's won Formula 3, he then won Formula 2. He had a year out last year, so I think it will take him some time this year to come back to racing and acclimatise to the rigours of F1. The second rookie is Nick de Vries at AlphaTauri. He's a very capable driver. He won Formula 2, he won Formula E, and he also scored points on his debut when he filled in for Alex Albon at Williams at Monza last year, which was a very impressive drive. So I think my pick is that Nick will beat his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, which would be really impressive. And then they're Red Bull's sister team, right? So he'd be knocking at the door of Red Bull if he really has a few capable seasons. So I think De Vries will be more than capable of performing in F1. And the final rookie is Logan Sargent, who is the only American driver on the grid. He's from Miami, so he's got his home race in May as well. But he's racing for the weakest team, I'd say, in Williams. So I really wouldn't place too much expectation on Sargent's performance. Thanks for all your questions, and keep up to date with all the latest sports news on Independent Sport, and watch more on Independent TV. We'll see you again on You Ask the Questions.